Welcome to PowerUp podcast, the podcast that seeks to empower and dismantle, giving us the power and confidence to question, deconstruct, rebuild, and expand in life. I'm your host, AmaRouge, voiceover and multidisciplinary artist, well-being advocate, food and book geek with over 14 years of movement-centered experience.
I am your host, Mesma, artist, choreographer, yogi and coach with a passion for alchemy, creativity, transformation and workplace wellness.
We recognise that we can't dismantle and empower or be empowered without first learning ourselves, diving deeper to unlearn the harmful, restrictive and unprogressive. It's an ongoing practice and journey for us all, which is why we created this podcast.
Our show features guests doing the work to enlighten, deconstruct and power up in their own magical ways.
We're going to be having conversations around the power of healing, transformation, well-being and creativity, and how they feed our personal and collective evolution, how they help us power up.
It's 2022.
Oh my God!
How did that happen? And it's actually not even just 2022, it's February. What?
No, it's absolutely bonkers. I don't understand.
Right, I feel like February is the new January because I wasn't ready.
Do you know what? I actually completely agree. And I think most of our listeners will probably agree because everyone I've been speaking to have been saying, oh my God, January still feels like it needs to be slow. And I still feel like there's so much happening and I feel like I'm catching up and I feel like spring is going to be the beginning of my new year. And I'm hearing that a lot. So
Yeah.
I think February is the new January.
Listeners, what do you think? Is February the new January? And welcome back, PowerUp Podcast. We are one.
Woo! We are one. And this is the first episode of season 4. Can you believe it?
I literally cannot believe that we've been going for a whole year.
I
and
know.
It's been such a joy.
It's been amazing, hasn't it?
Yeah, it really has.
And
thank you to our amazing listeners for supporting us for a whole year.
Yes, honestly, thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing your feels with us. Thank you for sharing your feedback, sharing your favorite episodes and what you're taking away. Honestly, we love to hear it. And however you want to tell us, whether it's online, socials, emails, in person, voice notes, we really love it all because we put a lot of love and energy and time into this podcast. And it's so beautiful, but it is really full of ourselves. And it doesn't just happen. There's a lot of magic that happens behind the scenes to make this podcast happen and to share this collective evolution, to continue evolving ourselves and to continue supporting all of you in your evolution. So we love hearing what's resonating with you and how it's supporting you in that. So keeping on, keep all of the feedback coming. And
yes,
hopefully
please.
we can keep going for another year and beyond, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And do you know what, actually, Belle, what would probably be lovely is, listeners, are there any themes that you would like us to cover that we haven't yet covered? We would like to know. Tell us, reach out to us in all the ways. All of the connection points are in the show notes. That would be really lush to know, no?
That would be really lush to know. Yes.
We are opening this season with a theme which I think will resonate with a lot of you, which is imposter syndrome.
Yes.
So let's just get straight into it. What is imposter syndrome? Belle, hit us.
Hit it.
That was that's the intro to Lose My Breath by Destiny Child, if you didn't know.
Love it. I actually heard Countdown, but hey ho.
Oh my God, I can hear Countdown. I can hear it. Another banging show. Just saying,
Love
love
it.
Countdown.
Love it. So what is imposter syndrome? And Amma and I, obviously I can't speak for you, Amma, but you are going to be sharing soon, have both had, really suffered with or really been living with imposter syndrome for most of our lives.
Yeah.
And really what imposter syndrome is this inability to accept that our success is deserved or has been like achieved legitimately.
Mm,
That we tend to think that we've been lucky or maybe it was a mistake, rather than actually being to do with our skills or our effort. And an example for me as a dancer, coming to dance quite late, I was just so convinced that I was on the back foot, that every company that I was in, I was completely convinced that I wasn't actually supposed to be there, that I was the imposter, and
mm,
like having that story of like, well, I'm not the real dancer in this space. It's
yeah.
like I wore that on my sleeves in every single company, no matter how many years. Now I think it's actually 20 years I've been dancing for, but still it's like, no, I'm an imposter. I'm not really allowed to be in this space.
Yeah, I totally hear that.
Hmm.
Just as you were talking, I was thinking of all the examples of me doing that within the dance space as well and within creative spaces, and still actually, which we'll get into that later personally, but it's it's very much, I would describe it very much as being alive in the mind.
Mm,
And um, maybe there's something in there as to understanding that thoughts are not facts, you know,
mhm.
because I feel that it starts in the mind and then it projects outwardly in the choices we make, in the way we
Absolutely.
show up, and what we feel is possible, how possible we feel we are, and what we feel we're capable of. How do we
Mm,
how do we identify, one, if we do suffer from imposter syndrome, or if it is something that is kind of showing up for us, and how can we be compassionate to ourselves whilst we're kind of unraveling that?
great questions, big questions.
Yeah,
Um, and I wanted to just kind of give a few examples of things that might be going on for us, because I think sometimes it's hard to recognize that actually, yes, this is going on for us. So I just wanted to list some of those kind of like characteristics or,
yeah, that would be
those like
great.
spot signs. So doubting our abilities, of course, is a really important one. And then like believing that we've kind of fooled others. So that kind of feeling of like being a fraud.
I'm laughing because I'm like, I've had this feeling. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm sure I'm gonna have had many of these feelings on the list, but I'm laughing because I've gone straight back to a moment where I'm like, "Yep, I know that feeling in my
right.
body."
Yeah. It's not much fun actually thinking
No.
that we're a fraud. And that kind of like, waiting to be exposed
Yep,
as the person in the space that doesn't belong is
yep,
not fun.
no.
Often like having this fear, like this overriding fear that we won't live up to expectations. So it's kind of like this fear of the future.
Yes. Can I share a quote that I discovered in my notes yesterday,
Yes, please.
really randomly? And for me, it relates to what you just said about fear. And the note goes like this: "Fear is an emotion that tells me how I'm feeling at the moment. It's not an indication of how things will go."
Who was that by? Sorry.
Got no idea. I think
Oh,
it's off the back of a conversation I was having with my friend Simone,
I
over
love it.
2 years ago. It's just a
Love that.
random note in there. Yeah.
And so true. So true. Back to the list. Another example is so like reflectively berating what we did. So rather than going like, oh, I've created this thing, oh, I've achieved this thing, being kind of stuck in the past, going over how bad we perceive it to have been
Mm,
or what we could have done better. A perception that everyone else has it all together, knows all the
yeah.
answers, and then kind of like valuing their opinion, their abilities, their even their needs over our own.
Mm.
Hmm.
Wow, that's deep. That last one is really
Right.
deep, and I'm sure
Yeah.
that plays out a lot. So these are effectively the different ways that imposter syndrome can show up for different people, right?
Yeah. Yeah. How it can manifest within us. And I think it's for me that there was this sort of moment of accepting, oh, this is what's going on. I mean, I'm a big believer in we understand the label. and then we don't wear it to the point where it becomes, well, I have this, so, because for me it's about the unlearning. It's about, okay, I'm living with this thing, but I'm also unlearning this thing. So I spot these, I spot how this is manifesting, and then I can also make a choice of, just because that's what happens, I don't have to repeat this pattern. I can actually make a change, and I can shift out of this.
Yes, which is the whole reason we created this podcast. Is that
Mm,
the central heart of this podcast, right, is unlearning, so
mm,
that we can evolve beyond those restrictive beliefs, ideas, anything that is limiting us from really meeting our true selves and coming back home to
yes.
ourselves. And so that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. I would love to share just like a few examples of actually how we might experience it. So how does it affect our behavior?
Yeah, that would be great. Please tell us.
Awesome. So one of them is overachieving, which I hope we'll have some time to speak about later. Another one is actually sabotaging our own success. Like, to prove our belief is true, we actually sabotage ourselves.
Yeah.
Another one is like concealing, like, because we're scared to be discovered as an imposter. I think I do this, concealing our, suffering with it in silence and trying to hide it from everyone else.
Because it may
Mm.
reflect badly on everything you are
Yeah.
sharing and creating and bringing to the world. You're like, "Oh,
Mm.
no, can't possibly be sharing that I'm an imposter, or I suffer from
Yeah.
imposter syndrome alongside all of this.
Yeah.
I'm not allowed to."
Absolutely. Feeling anxious, obviously, kind of talked about this a little bit already.
Mm.
Procrastination or over preparing.
Oh my god, that's
And
both of them are me.
yeah, and it's funny, isn't it, how often they actually get in the way of doing the thing.
Yes. Yes,
Yeah, yeah.
absolutely. Spend so much time preparing or procrastinating that you don't actually get to doing the thing.
Hmm. And then undermining our achievements, or like pointing out our mistakes, or even discounting praise of other people, like that we really can't receive those well done moments and those compliments, to the point that we actually kind of discredit them or point out why they're not real.
This reminds me of something I was reading in Atomic Habits by James Clear, which I'm sure many people have read because it's been out for quite a while. And I'm a bit late to the party, but if you haven't read it, I would definitely recommend it. And he
Great
talks
book.
about, right? And he talks about how attached we can become to our identities, and how often not forming new habits, and ultimately not changing ourselves to become the people that we want to become, often happens because we're very attached to an identity already. And
Mm,
the identity is something that doesn't serve us because we're so attached to it. It can often be the block, effectively, in what helps us to form new habits and ultimately form new processes and ultimately change
mm,
in the way that we want.
yeah,
And it's so interesting, isn't it? What you were just saying about imposter syndrome, and how people may compliment us and may congratulate us on work that we've created, or anything that we've put out, and we will do anything to discredit that because it doesn't align with this identity that we understand of ourselves.
yeah. Yeah. And I think if we think about that in the bigger scale of things, of how actually we can end up denying the world of our magic because of this belief, that maybe that means that we don't go for the job or the promotion, or
Mm,
we don't put out the book that we've written, or, all of these things that we have, these gifts that we have to share, that if we let this control our lives, actually we're denying the world of who we are.
yeah, and there is only
Mm,
one of us.
right?
I think personally for me, it shows up in pretty much all of those different ways that you listed. I definitely, I'm less of a perfectionist now, but it definitely still comes through as, I like to say I'm an excellentist now, but there's definitely
Mm,
still um, There's
Love
definitely
that.
still elements of perfectionism there, which I think link to my imposter syndrome. This idea of
Mm.
needing to know everything, perfectly, how to do everything perfectly before I do it, because if I don't know everything, then I can't get started. And if I don't know everything, therefore I won't be good at it, or I'll fail. And then people will figure out I couldn't do it, which is what I thought at the beginning, because I didn't know everything. And as we've said before, I'm probably a number 7 in the Enneagram, which, for those who don't know what that is, I'm sure Ella will talk a little bit about that in a minute. But that links
Yes.
to me potentially being a number 7 as well.
Mm.
And then, also this idea sometimes where I've managed to successfully complete something, or I've had a really positive experience and I'm really proud of myself. Um, Sometimes that whole beration that will come after, of reflection of, oh, but how much of that was down to me, or was it even as good as I thought it was in the moment, and then go through and like pick holes in it. Um, that kind of can show up for me as well. Um, and then I think also this idea of being worried that I don't have the competencies to do whatever it is I want to do. And so, because I don't have the competencies, I just stop myself in my tracks before I even begin.
It's so funny knowing you and knowing like how much experience you have that this is going on inside your mind.
Yeah, I know, right?
Mm. And so imposters, and when I'm saying imposters, I do mean people who think you're an imposter, because guess what? You're not.
Yes.
Get your stuff out there. Like, we even just sharing, I think even just actually sharing that I am living with imposter syndrome helps other people to speak about this. And I really I also feel this is very much connected to the patriarchy and the systems that we live in that teach us that certain people are at the top. We learn that on TV, we learn that on storybooks, and that we internalize that. And that can manifest as believing that we're an imposter if we don't fit with that ideal that we are fed of what that person at the top looks like. And so I actually think it's also, we talk so much about the unlearning that we're doing and how we can change the world with that. But part of this for me is also unlearning our imposter syndrome means seeing the people who kind of our reflections at the top. So changing representation can also lead to changing how we perceive ourselves and how we perceive about who might be or might not be an imposter. So for me, this is also about there's a level of activism in unlearning imposter syndrome, and there's a level of activism in working towards this
Mm.
change and supporting other people to understand if they are living with imposter syndrome, and then how to unlearn that and how to go for it and put themselves out there and be at the top.
So there's a level of structural change and systemic change, and in the sense of inclusivity.
Absolutely, that's why the personal is political, right?
So, Belle, what tools can we use to manage imposter syndrome, and what can we unlearn within that?
Great question, Amma. And so for me, there's kind of many sides of what we can unlearn and ways that we can manage it. And in terms of unlearning, I think belief is so important. Our belief creates our reality. Linking back to what we said about, if we believe we can't, we can. If we believe we can, we can. So
Mm.
this is where I think that Enneagram intersects beautifully with unlearning imposter syndrome. And for listeners, we have those episodes back in
Season 1.
season 1. Essentially, there are many kind of Enneagram beliefs that really intersect this work, and the more that we can look at how is our belief holding back what we are doing and what we are going for, the more that we can start to unlearn that. And a belief, it's a really hard thing to unlearn. For me, it's about learning to live with knowing that I have that belief, but then choosing the higher over the lower. So is that belief true? No. Is it there?
Mm.
Yes. Okay, so what am I going to do? Am I going to put all my focus on, so for example, mine is a not belonging belief or a not worthy belief. Am I going to put all my focus in that? Or am I going to remember and realign with what I would love and go for that thing? So I think this is a really important part of this work. And Valerie Young has done some great work on the kind of the different types of imposter and how it can manifest, which I think the more you know about that, the more helpful, the more you can just make a choice, you know, and again, like put that vibration on what you'd really love to do. But also, yeah, also knowing, like understanding those behaviors, like if overworking is a common pattern for you as someone who experiences imposter syndrome, then can you start to put an end to that? Because again, we have these cycles, you know, if you overwork, you're going to get very stressed. If you are very stressed, your body's not going to be able to heal itself. It's just this ongoing cycle. So where can you change? Going back to the habits, going back to the atomic habits, where can you change what you're doing so that you are actually holding yourself accountable to yourself, and so that you're training yourself to veer away from, even from like that external validation, you know, like when we work on ourselves and when we learn to love ourselves, we're not going to be so much in that need of proving to other people. We can really find peace and solace within who we are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And like, you know, for example, this, when we believe that we're going to get found out as a fraud, we're going to start acting a little bit guilty, right? And people are like human beings, we are a little bit psychic, so we're going to pick up on these behaviors, we're going to pick up on those cues that people are giving and just be like, something's a little bit off here. So the more that we can do this work on remembering who we really are, on coming back home to, you know, am I like, if you think about this fraudulent idea of yourself, are you there because you're a bad person? No.
No.
Are you there with passion and because you would love to do the thing?
And
Yeah.
because you care about it.
Right. And so putting that in the focus, and like, I much prefer someone who is vulnerable and shares what's coming up for them than
Yeah.
someone who's perfect. So can we show up more and more as human beings? And I think that this creates these beautiful ripples as well in society. Again, going back to that kind of trickle down of going for what you would love and putting yourself out there, but also this trickle down of, if we behave in the way that we would like to be treated, then we are going to have this beautiful effect on other people. And we're going to allow more people to understand that they are also living with imposter syndrome and that that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
2 more things that I'd love to share that have really helped me. One is learning to say no. I actually think probably for you, Amma, it's learning to say yes. I think we're like opposites in terms of the ways that our imposter syndrome manifests,
Yeah.
right? Like if you're someone that's like, I have to be, you know, I'm not ready, then actually, can you just start to lean in? No one's ready. Like, we're all just making it up.
You know enough just to begin, even if it's on an intuitive level of knowing enough.
Exactly. And actually, yeah, intuition. I'll come back to that. Just to go back to saying no. So I would say I'm the opposite. My imposter syndrome wants to prove that I am worthy. And so I won't admit that I can't actually handle that amount of work. And I'll just say yes to everything. So for me, that was a huge thing of like, actually, I'm whole and I don't have to prove myself all the time. So I'm just going to say no. And it's just been so helpful. The other one I was going to offer was just understanding what kind of criticism you're inviting in. So I would
Oh, that's a
love,
really
right?
good one.
I used to really love asking people what they thought and other people's opinions. And actually, I've really found that my opinion is the most helpful because it's, you know, it's not coming from, it's that. And I guess it comes back again to that intuition of learning to listen to ourselves. Well, why am I doing this thing? Is it to prove myself to somebody else? Or is it because I'm listening to the reason that I want to create whatever it is I'm creating? And the more that we can come back to that, then, you know, this sort of needing to look for external opinion just fades away. And so now I'm quite mindful about constructive criticism only. And I love to work with the Liz Lerman technique to receive criticism, which actually is just feedback. It's not criticism at all. But I just think that's a really important one, is kind of being mindful about who you're getting those opinions from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you outsourcing your own wisdom for somebody else's opinion?
Absolutely.
I read that recently and I was like, oh my God, yes. Like, how often do we outsource our own wisdom, aka our intuition, for somebody else's opinion?
Yeah.
Do we need to seek outside of ourselves all the time?
No, because our intuition is our inner tuition. Enough said. Yeah.
We know something that the listeners maybe don't know yet, and it would be wonderful if you could share this opportunity with listeners to see who may benefit from this and who may want to jump on into this.
Ooh, yeah.
So Ella has been creating something wonderful for us.
Took me a really long time because I have imposter syndrome.
The irony.
It took me about a year to make this course. Yeah, this course on living with imposter syndrome. But I finished it. So I've just got to have, I'm just like having it kind of read, the copy read and stuff now, seeking that external opinion.
Which sometimes is necessary. It's just
Right.
important to ask yourself the question at these different junctures.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And it's going to launch on the 14th of March. We are giving away 3 free spots.
If you know of someone, if it's yourself and you feel like this is a barrier, but really something that you could benefit from, then please get in touch with us. All will be included in the show notes.
So next week, we are diving deeper into this topic with a very special guest, and we can't wait for you to meet them. We're super happy to be diving into this topic.
Yep.
Giving more visibility to it is the one. No shame in that game. And we will see you all next week.
Thank you for listening. You can connect to us and our guests via the links in each episode's show notes. Before you go, we invite you to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of the goodness to come. And if you enjoyed today, perhaps tell a friend to tell a friend. We are always grateful for you, our listeners, for our fabulous guests, and to everyone who has contributed to and been a part of our journey here.
Our music is by Tomo Carter. Everything else is brought to you by us, the PowerUp Power Team.
I'm Mesma.
I am AmaRouge. And we are PowerUp Podcast.